congratulations on being nominated for the Spotlight Award for this film.
Thank you so much. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, it's super exciting. I'd love to start at the beginning of this process for you. I believe you met the director at Sundance. What was that like, building that collaboration for the film?
Yeah, I mean, it was really a true indie. We met at Sundance in 2020. Um and everything was set to go. He had the money, he had the financing, we were good. And then COVID hit and everything unraveled and we didn't end up filming until 22.
Wow.
Um but it was but anytime, I feel like a lot of the like indies that I've done, it's such like a years long process to get them, up and running and off the ground that, the silver lining in that is you really get to kind of like sit with the movie for a couple of years and like process and shoot things back and forth between, yourself and the director and really kind of like find a language that I think, because of the time you have becomes much stronger.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a great way to look at it. So what was that process like for you as you bounce things back and forth? What were you marinating on? What really inspired you about the script that you wanted to try to capture visually?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, so I'm from the Bronx. And it's pretty rare that you get a movie about the Bronx, period. But even rarer that that movie is written and directed by someone else from the Bronx. So it was definitely um, just having the chance to kind of tell a story from the perspective of people who actually are from the place is really special to me. So I jumped at the opportunity and then, really read the script and loved it. Kind of, it's a beautiful kind of like surrogate father-son story. The cast that was put together is amazing with Louis Guzman and Asante Black. Um, even Coral Pena is amazing in it. Like just the cast is phenomenal and everything fell into place. But yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, how would you say that, your experience being from the Bronx played into, your visual ideas for the piece? Yeah.
I mean, I think like in the broader New York City sense of it, I think um from like a kind of technical standpoint, cameras have gotten sensitive enough now that we can move away from the kind of like, big condor with lights down at the end of the block kind of style of lighting for nighttime in the city. So that's something that like I feel really strongly about and trying to reflect in my work that like in the same way that a, you know, candelabra is made up of like, a bunch of tiny points of hard light that combine to create a soft light. I feel like night exteriors in New York are a similar thing where, it's just kind of thousands of points of light from all up and down the block and above and below. And they all kind of, combine to envelop the actors in this kind of beautiful, like, envelop people, living in the city in this kind of like beautiful soft light that that is what I think of when I think of night, where I'm from, and it's something I wanted to replicate for Story Ave.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's two things that really stand out that I'd love to ask about, which is the use of color and then also the use of movement, because I feel like it's very intentional. And yeah, so how did you come to the conclusion of how you wanted to really utilize both those elements?
Yeah, I'll talk about movement first. I think it was important to us, like the first I think like the knee-jerk reaction when it's like we're making a movie about graffiti artists of color from the Bronx is like it's got to be gritty and it's got to be handheld and it's got to be all these things. Um, and I think that early on we really came to the decision to really move the camera in a classical way, frame these actors in a way that is kind of a more traditional old Hollywood kind of way, in a way that really these characters have not been kind of framed before.
Mm,
So, all of our movement really comes from a place of wanting to be very intentional, wanting to reflect what is happening in the scene, what's happening in the characters, inner lives, and really just kind of have these kind of beautiful, slow, intentional dollies, in a place we haven't really seen it before.
Yeah, it's a cool juxtaposition of styles that yeah, that aren't really seen very often. Yeah, and then when it comes to color, I mean, what really inspired you to figure out the color palette of the film? Like, were you like for references, were you looking at graffiti artists? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, I think graffiti artists for sure. A lot of street photography. I think the work of Khalik Allah was a big reference point for me. Uh, there's another photographer, Matt Weber, who. So let me just back up. Khalik Allah is a photographer that like kind of like embedded himself on the corner of 125th and Lex, like outside bodegas, and kind of just like has spent years just like capturing faces in close up, like beautiful dark skinned faces under like kind of like urban lighting. And it's
Okay.
just like the most mind blowing photography. Like, you know what I mean? But it's all very kind of like bright and colorful and in a way that kind of like celebrates these people. So Khalik's work was a huge inspiration. And then Matt Weber was a cab driver for years, and just kept a camera with a roll of Tri-X in the seat next to him as he drove around New York. And like just kind of, Matt's kind of, all-encompassing like vision of everywhere in New York, like people living their daily lives. His photography is also amazing and was a huge inspiration as well. And
Yeah.
then, in terms of color, from like a very basic kind of color standpoint, Kadir's life is very like cold and blue at the beginning of the movie. In no spoilers, but his brother has recently passed at the start of the movie. And so, his brother, we use kind of like gold and warm colors to represent his brother. Um, and so, our color kind of journey through the film is really starting Kadir in this kind of like colder, bluer world, with like hints of kind of sunsetty brotherly love.
Hmm.
um, at the brother's funeral. And then we go away from that. Everything is very cool. And then Kadir and his friend Mo go to kind of like meet up with their friends at this kind of like apartment that is kind of like the home base for the graffiti crew, called OTL. And in OTL, we just like it just bursts with color. Like the whole idea is that you need to see Kadir in his kind of like mundane daily life, and then through color, really make this world of kind of graffiti enticing to him. Do you know what I mean? Like he's just surrounded and like awash in color, and suddenly everything gets a lot more kind of like visually exciting.
Hmm.
Um, and then when he meets Louis and kind of Louis takes him in, he's in his apartment. Suddenly, like Louis' apartment is the first like really just kind of like nice, warm, homey place he's had so far. Um, and then, by the end of the movie, these kind of, all of these three things kind of like combine into into kind of like the new person Kadir becomes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really beautiful that the color has a whole arc that goes along with, his maturation over the course of the film. Yeah. What is something, a technical challenge or even something that maybe was more simple, but that you're just so happy with what you were able to achieve from the film?
Um, I think, I'll talk about uh, you know, we had this kind of like midpoint sequence where we knew we wanted Kadir to go to a museum. Filming in museums in New York, like on a small budget, obviously very difficult,
Hmm.
not only for location fees, but just like the amount of insurance required. Just film in a museum is kind of just like a hurdle. It's very difficult for an indie to to jump.
Yeah.
Uh, and we found this amazing room. Um, that was all like kind of frescoes.
Mm.
Um, and they let us come in. They were actually closed for renovation, and we were able to get in and kind of film in this place. And we kind of had this beautiful. It was kind of a touch and go thing if they were going to let us film at all, and if we were going to film, if it had to be handheld, if we could put sticks down. And then when they found out kind of what the film was and what the story was and what it meant to the character to be in this room, um, they were like, "Come on in, don't tell anybody, put your track down, do some dollies,
Wow.
do whatever you want." And it turns into this kind of really beautiful sequence where this kid who's kind of always been told that like painting on walls is a crime, gets to enter a space and be surrounded by frescoes and kind of like really comprehend that painting on walls is just like is an art form and is an ancient art form, and kind of like he is now kind of taking on, he's like the next person to pass that, to get that baton in that kind of
Yeah.
like fresco world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really beautiful. And that's such an indie story of like touch and go, like will it even, be able to happen?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I'd love to ask you, what you took away from this film, like as an artist, how did it help you grow?
I think, this film was really great for me, just kind of like in my own personal journey. I'd been doing a lot of TV and, some bigger features. And it was this like just really felt like a homecoming. You know what I mean? Like it just really
Mhm.
was really, really nice to just kind of get back to like the basics of filmmaking. Very small crew, our G&E team was 2 and 2, like, we had like 4 or 5 lights. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? So like it was really beautiful to kind of like get back to the indie filmmaking, which is where I come from. Um, and do that in a place that I'm like so familiar with and have so much love for, and do it with a crew that was almost entirely from New York, was really special for me.
yeah. I mean, that sounds like an incredible experience and definitely a very inspirational one as an artist. So what's it like to be nominated for an ASC award for your work on the film?
It is crazy. I think like, for me, like I mean, first of all, it's just very humbling, because as someone that, you know, goes to the clubhouse and it's kind of like the mecca of, you know what I mean, of like cinematography.
Yeah,
Just the most special thing is to be nominated, by fellow cinematographers and to know that my work speaks to them. And to kind of have that, it's a hard movie to make. And so to have that work, we took like big swings. It's just, to have that kind of like validated by the kind of like masters of the craft is incredibly special for me.